I'm managing time for the speakers, but I'm also just getting you seated and wanting to point out that we do have 2 restrooms out in the entryway. And as they say, you should look at all the exits in case of fire. So please go to the nearest one to you. There's one on each end behind the stage and 2 in the back. And we have a very busy day. Hopefully, all of you will learn a little bit. It's really about a community definition. I was going to say this is our first annual Resilient Lands Symposium, but then again, maybe it's just the Land Symposium. And there'll be follow-on meetings of some sort. So part of this is as a community to start defining for ourselves what resiliency, that overused word now in the media, but what that means to Anderson Valley and to our managing our own lives and our properties and our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yoriko, and who's the president of the Land Trust, and we will go from there. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I see a very beautiful site full of lots of friends and neighbors and distinguished visitors from Anderson Valley and beyond. So, as introduced, my name is Yoriko Kishimoto, and I have the honor of serving as the president of the Anderson Valley Land Trust. So, on behalf of our entire board of directors, and on behalf of our very hardworking organizing committee, and our supporting organizations, which you see up on here. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Anderson Valley Resilient Lands Symposium, Thinking Like a Watershed. So we're all looking forward to meeting each and every one of you over the course of today. So as I was preparing for this morning, I was reminded of a Japanese essay about change and constancy. So in some ways, we think of Anderson Valley as timeless, as classic, and as being such a beautiful valley that we never wanted to change. But we know the upheavals that the valley and its people have gone through many generations. And so I just wanted to read a couple sentences of the essay that starts. It says, "The flow of the river is ceaseless, but its water is never the same. The bubbles that float in the pools, now vanishing, now forming, are not of long duration. And so in the world are man and his dwellings." So today is about that change and constancy. With severe climate change causing havoc to all 4 elements: fire, earth, land, wind, and fire, it is high time to bring people together to assess where we are as a valley, as a watershed, and see what we might need to change as a community in the way we manage our lands. So I'm former mayor of Palo Alto, and so I like to say that things are not today the way they are because by chance. Anderson Valley is so beautiful and resilient as it is because of the very hard work done by many generations of people and the decisions that we all make, small and big, every day. And those begin, of course, with the many generations of the Native Americans here who we will be hearing from soon. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you to all the people in this room, and I know there are many of you, who have been fierce guardian for Anderson Valley over the decades. And you know who you are, but let's start with a round of applause for them. Okay, great. I do want, you saw the list of supporting organizations. Yeah, truly, we could not be here today, or we could not move forward without without the full support of our partners. And an important part of resilience that we're talking about today is the strength of the network. So, I mean, I think just from that point alone, Anderson Valley is in great shape because of our strong ties. Our partners produced everything from the streaming, I guess, Amy here, and the food, all the items that you see, the coffee you got this morning. Many people pitched in. I wanted to see if there was any elected officials to introduce. Is Supervisor Ted Williams here?
I am, thanks for having me.
Okay, welcome. Let's see, Andy, Public Health Officer Andy Corin. Thank you. Thank you for.
I look forward to learn a lot.
Thank you for being here. Let's see, Louise Simpson was potentially going to stream in. Is she here by any chance? Okay, she might be. There's since we did sell out, we're streaming, and she said she would be watching online. And Community Service Director Francois Christian. Francois, okay. Thank you for being here, and well, I'm sure there's many others to introduce, but thank you all for being here. Anderson Valley Land Trust was created 30 years ago to help landowners protect their land for the future generations and educate the public. And we're at a very exciting point in our history, and I just wanted to ask our board members to stand up or raise their hand. Yeah. It's a very hard, very talented and hardworking group of people I'm privileged to work with. And is there anybody here from our advisory committee? No, I don't know them. And I do have to give a special shout out to our symposium organizing committee. That's, we've been meeting since January to bring you today. And is Jocelyn here and Linda's here, right, of course? This Jocelyn, yes, from our. Okay. All right. So standing here with me are our partners for today, two women with huge impact on the quality of our lands and our co-sponsors for today. So I wanted to invite up first Sarah Woodridge, celebrated winemaker for Maggie Hawk and president of the Anderson Valley Wine Association. So she and Executive Director Courtney McGrath have been doing an outstanding job leading the association. Thank you very much. Would you like to say a few words?
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Yurka said, I'm Sarah Woodridge, president of the ABWA. I first encountered Anderson Valley in 2010 when I joined the Copan Wines winemaking team. I wanted to get more involved and joined the ABWA back in 2019. Then I was elected as president in 2021. I care very deeply about this valley. There's something special to me when I first started making wine, but then equally when I started to get to know the community, I just wanted to be here a lot. Here I am. Our organization represents 90 vineyards and over 60 wineries. 70% of those members are fish-friendly farming certified, which is pretty awesome. Navarro being one of the very first when it was established by Laurel Marcus in 1999. Today, I believe Connor Bennett is here. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. Connor represents fish-friendly farming and is here to answer any and all questions you may have about the program. Our goal with the ABWA is to get our membership as close to 100% certified as possible in the future.
I think that would be it.
Yes. To me, one thing that makes Anderson Valley wine growing community remarkable is that many have been farming organically, biodynamically, and regeneratively for decades. They don't boast about it. It's just part of their fabric. And I think that's that speaks for itself, really, compared to other wine growing regions. So it's nothing new, and we're proud of it. The ABWA sent out a member survey a few years ago, asking mostly how we were doing as an organization, but the main thing that spoke to us is the need to look at environmental issues impacting our valley. So as a result, we formed two committees, the Environmental Committee and the Vineyard Committee, led by Jocelyn Thorson. Again, she's very involved in those aspects of our community. So thank you to Jocelyn. Thank you to Doug Stewart also, who sits on that committee. In the Vineyard Committee, we have Norm Kobler and Andrew Beebe. So they work cohesively together to address those issues: fire, drought, labor. Those are huge things affecting the wine growing community here. And as an organization representing the wineries and vineyards here, it's a big priority to us to make sure that we give them the resources to do so and learn more. We're always looking for more folks to join these committees. So if you feel so inclined, please come talk to me, approach Courtney DeGraff, our executive director. We'd be happy, or Jocelyn, or any of the names I just mentioned. We'd be happy to have you on board as well. It's inspiring to see these groups take off, and our job as the board to really keep environmental issues for Anderson Valley top of mind at all points throughout the year. And I look forward to continuing to push forward these initiatives for the community as well. So thank you, and thank you to everybody virtually and in person coming today. It really does speak a lot to how important this community is to everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. And Linda Maggie, and that needs no introduction probably, but she's the miracle worker representing Mendocino County Resource Conservation District and the Navarro River Watershed. She's also the Watershed Coordinator. So as you know, she's kind of the face of restoration advice and funding in our valley, and she's been an indispensable part of our organizing committee, and we'll be chairing the first panel with that.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It's so great to see such a great turnout. No pun intended, but this is a watershed event, and we're really excited to finally have this day here. Just from being here, working on this since January with Nancy Horner, Barbara Goodell, Patrick Miller, and Yotoko, and Jocelyn have been the main. Steve Wood was early on, and so we've just got a great representation from the Land Trust, and so thank you everybody from the Land Trust Board that's helped put this together. So I'm a newcomer to the Anderson Valley, came in 2000, and mostly been, since that time, jumped into the creeks and the rivers. I've had the good fortune of coming to the land, which is called now the land was Chenoa back in the day, which is where the three streams come together, and you'll hear about that later in my presentation, to become the Navarro River. So it's part of what brought me to this work, and I wear a lot of hats, literally and figuratively, as if you know me, and. So the Navarro River Resource Center is, we've shared an office with the Land Trust since 2005. And so that's going on 17 years, which is just amazing to think about. And the River Center is under the umbrella of the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District. So the River Center in and of itself is supported primarily this year, thankfully, to the Anderson Valley Wine Growers Association. We were the beneficiaries of the silent auction, which was very much appreciated because previous to that, we kind of relied on Beer Fest, which, as we all know, during COVID went away. And so we were literally out of funds to keep the River Center open. So just everything kind of came together, and when we had Beer Fest as well from the Anderson Valley Beer Fest. So we have a little bit of, for the next year, at least, we have our funds to keep our shingle out for the Navarro River Resource Center, and we hope for many more years to come. My time is mostly paid for through the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District, which is a special district of the state. Started in 1965, and we work on it. We're regulatory, working with landowners on a voluntary basis to implement best management practices for forests, soils, and water. I work on primarily the soil and water program, and in the Navarro, we work on stream flow enhancement with the Nature Conservancy and Trout Unlimited primarily, and also a lot of other partners. We've done a lot of road work, sediment work, etc. I want to call out my coworkers here today. Seth Myrick is the Sustainable Ag Project Manager. We have Katie Smith, who's working with me in the Navarro as well, and Jessica Reed is here, who was born and raised here in the Navarro and is back as a Grizzly Corps fellow. So really looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you so much to everyone for being here.
I'm going to ask Linda will be introducing Ron Lincoln, but I also wanted to point out, did we ask Ron Connor to just raise your hand? You're the fish-friendly representative, and I see also Dr. Christopher Chen is here as well. There he is. Yes, is our advisor for vineyards. And Linda.
Yeah, so Christopher Chen, he's our UC Cooperative Extension Vineyard Advisor and new to the area. Thanks for being here, Chris. It's great to have you. All right, so there were historically 19 known village sites in the Anderson Valley, known as Tabota Long Valley by the Tabotay people, the Pomo people that lived here. They lived here for thousands of years before California was Spain, Mexico, or the United States. We respectfully acknowledge the original inhabitants, their ancestors and descendants, and their long stewardship of this land. And with that, I am very honored to introduce Ronald Lincoln, who is here from Covelo Round Valley Tribe, who is the head of the Hintil Association of America. And Ron is doing great work bringing back the cultural languages, upholding the cultural languages and the life ways of his people. And Ron is going to do an invocation for us. And Ron, we are so pleased to have you here this morning, and very honored that you've taken the time out of your day to come over all this way and help us start this day off right.
Ekinani Nikaska, Homahani Ukon, Hessian Wonam Chin Midam. Kilahayang Knisti, Sintama Koma Poma. On these days, good morning. I greet you in the three tribes that I represent. Poma and the Pomo, Red Earth people. There's many, like Sonoma Lake and Mendocino County, there's many different dialects. We're part of the Kai Pomo, the Northern Pomo, so I'll be sharing with that. And we have, there's about 13 tribes in Round Valley for about 250 miles that were forced driven to Round Valley. So I'm up 3 tribes. Wailaki, we call Kiniski. That word means we're made in the image of the Creator. Kankau, they're from the Paradise area. They were driven to Round Valley. And the Poma, they were also driven to Round Valley. So Wailaki, Kankau, Pomo, and I have a Splash European, and I got the good splash. So I didn't see no representation or support from any of the native entities, but I'm very honored that you asked me to come. We have some building sites down at Yorkville, but they were moved to Cloverdale and Hopland and Round Valley. And from there, kids were sent to boarding schools in different states. So I have distant relatives that come from Yorkville. And then Navarro has many village sites. So I went on the online to look at history of Woodwood. There's no village sites mentioned in this valley. All it mentioned was that the Pomo people come through, they harvest, gathered, and moved on. So you get the point. We have, in our way of, which you're here for a reason, hopefully by the end of the day, you'll have a plan to identify the cause. Knowing the cause, then you'll have a solution. Our native people here had commerce. Inland tribes with commerce with the coast tribes. It worked out very, very well. For thousands of years it worked. That system really worked. But as the Europeans came over to America, to this part of the country, it was very interesting. I'm going to go a little bit into kind of sharing with you what we see as our native people. Because our word for Europeans is Masan. And the true meaning of that word means different than, which means the thought process is different than. Because you brought the European thought process over to America here. Because when our people would see the settlers cut all the trees, oak trees, acorn trees, food, elderberries, our teas, they see them clear the land. They go, because when we harvest, we take what we need and move on, and then let it flourish for other families in future generations. We didn't take everything. And then they watched the covered wagons go to the rivers, creeks, load them up with fish. Then they brought them back to the land, they cleared and laid them all over the ground. They're amazed at what's going on. And then they took this spearhead, metal spearhead looking thing, pulled by an animal, and tore the Mother Earth up. What they were doing was turning the land, fertilizing it, and then they were plowing it. Our people didn't realize that. To them, they were destructive. So the word Masan is different than, the mind thought is different than. Because we didn't have that. We harvest what we needed, move on. We didn't harvest in the same area all the time, move to different place so that place can rejuvenate the teas and the medicines. And so I want to share that a little bit. So as we talk about what we have here, knowing the cause, is that we have to change our thought process. When you come together like this in our ceremonies, in our thought processes, we're spiritual people, human beings. We all have an energy, individual energy. When we come together, it's like a ceremony. So we're having a ceremony today. So our thought process, again, is to not think of ourselves. We have to change our thought. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Keep that in mind, because once you understand that and create balance, because if we're out of balance, our individual persons are out of balance because of what you do and how you do it, because of the European mentality, the thought process. Because I went back and looked at 700 years of why they're doing what they did here. Very, very rough times. So they brought that mentality over here. So when you change, you create balance within yourself, mind, body, and spirit, with love, hope, and faith in your prayers. Faith is your belief system, hope is a mental capacity, and love is so powerful. It creates empires and destroys empires. Also, you have respect for the environment. Because every living thing we have here, as we were shown, has a spirit about it. The water, living thing. The animals, the grass, everything. We respect that. We have ceremonies for that. Give thanks to creation. So we have our prayers in our ceremonies. Pray in the 4 directions, north, south, east, west. Pray for Mother Earth, nourish us, feed us, take care of us. We pray for the universe, because we're not here alone, it's so vast. Anything happens out there affects Mother Earth here, big time. And then our seventh element is to pray for our human beings, because we're not perfect, we need a lot of prayer. So we keep that in mind, you know, it's the thought process that we have. Once you come balanced with yourself, then that environment will become balanced. They say change is coming, it's already here, or else we won't be here talking about it. Change is already here. And try not to get the politics involved in it, because politics has a great element with it. And we learned that poly means many things, means multiple things. And ticks is bloodsucking. Anyway, today I'm real honored to have you, talk to you, and I spent, when in Ron Valley, there's multiple tribes. That's why I'm on 2 tribes, or about to one area. We had a boarding school there where a lot of the people from here, Como people, were sent up there to clear the area, if you get my drift. I came here, I graduated around in the late 60s, around 67, and we had a winning team, 4 years of top. And so we come to Boonville, and they gave us a good fight, but we beat them by a few points. I got to throw that in there. Anyway, the water system, understand that it's the life part of our world here, because we're all water babies. 70% of our body's water. In our language, we always pray to the water, energize it with your good vibrations. I love you, good water. And give it to your body, give it to your plants, give it to whatever you're growing, so it can energize that and it will come back to you. Our system is very monetary driven. I like to share with you that at the end of the day, when you come together and have a list of what you're going to do, use common sense for the future, not dollar and cents, because that will override that every time. Today, I would like to enhance each and one of us with a prayer song that we all have a song in us. We're all very unique. You'd be surprised. Human beings are very powerful people, mind, body, spirit. They're very powerful, because your brain is powerful, will make you or break you what you are. People are weirds. I don't address people, they're too weird. I address human beings that carry empathy. Just like with the animals we have out here. They're teachers, the environment's teachers. So we could move aside and understand the purpose we're here, then you'll find a better time to help what you're doing with the water. Why is it? Why is it? This is not only in Anderson Valley, it's global. Just turn on the news and see what's going on, because Mother Earth will correct itself. It's out of balance. The whole world's out of balance. When it spins fast, it creates these magnificent storms because it's trying to correct itself. You have weeds that grow with land's vacant, where then it's starting to correct itself. It has a purpose. We got to realize that. Then when you take that step forward in the future for the grandchildren, it'd be very helpful for them. Also, it's I'd like to share with you too that we have the words that we were taught is that we didn't have I in our language, or mine, or me. It was us, ours. So that's what we're taught. It's mine. No, in our community, it was us. In our community, it was ours. For example, we had one elder, I was in Oklahoma in the early 70s, he said they had a young man who was abusing his wife. So the leader sent a man over there and says, hey, don't do that no more. Behave yourself, because we're, anyway, he didn't listen. They sent 40 people over there says, hey, leave for a year. And finally appreciated that he had a family, so he behaved. But the community took care of the family, fed him, took care of him, whatever. With this, I'd like to say a prayer song for each and one of you, and then I'd like to read a message. I can go on forever, but my time is short. This is what's the problem, you know. Okay, this prayer song is for each individual to wake up that human spirit, to understand, to open eyes, take the blinders off, and see what we have here. It's so beautiful. Oh, yes, we. Himma hey yo ho yo ho, himma hey yo ho yo ho, himma hey yo ho yo ho, way hey yo ho, way hey yo ho, himma hey yo ho yo ho, himma hey yo ho yo ho. Hey yo ho yo ho, hey yo ho. Oh Yahweh, this comes from the elderberry. Gives you food, medicine, and it understands. I like to close with a message from our women folks back home. As you know, the ladies rule in our society. They're the ones pick the leaders. They're the ones that make decisions and we carry it out. Because the women folks, we believe, is life givers. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So we need to protect them, cherish them, life givers. Oh, let the tears happen. Endure, grieve, and move on. The only person who is with us our entire life is ourselves. Be alive while you're alive. Cherish your health. If it's good, preserve it. If it's unstable, improve it. If it's beyond what you can do, get help. And always remember, life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but the moments that take our breath away. Oh, Yahweh, Yahweh.
Thank you, Ron, for
Hi, everyone.
coming so far.
Jared Huffman. Thank you for.
Okay, so, yes, just last night, we have a last minute addition to the agenda, which is that literally last night, Congressman Gerald Huffman sent in a 2-minute reading for us, and it's on, and we're going to get that played right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Congressman Jared Huffman. Thank you for including me in this symposium, which is aptly focused on resilient lands. I want to thank the Anderson Valley Land Trust and your co-sponsors, Anderson Valley Wine Growers Association and the Navarro River Resource Center, for organizing this event. As most of you know, we had just hit the 5-year anniversary of the 2017 firestorms that rocked our world and also taught us a lot of lessons about resiliency. In Mendocino County, the destruction caused by the Redwood Complex fire in Redwood Valley, Potter Valley, was just devastating. It was a precedent-setting event which was then eclipsed by the historic and larger Mendocino National Forest event in 2018. No one ignores or makes light of fires anymore. We have worked to make our homes and our landscapes more resilient, and we've changed the way we fight fires. I attended an event last week in Coffee Park in Santa Rosa, where every home had been burned to the ground in 2017. I will always remember seeing that site as it was still burning. And now 5 years later, that community is rebuilt. It is a resilient community. And that was memory making too. We know that climate change is causing extreme weather resulting in these fires and also causing droughts and floods. And we know that we have to rethink how we operate so that we can not only survive these events, but improve our lives and future generations. So this symposium could not be more timely. Meetings of the minds like this are an important part of understanding the challenges we face and how to tackle them together, how to implement forward-thinking strategies. So you are so smart to work as a community on a local level to take effective steps in this direction to shape the future of the Anderson Valley and its resilience to the many threats of climate change. I really want to salute you for doing this. And you can count on my support. I'll be there continuing to work in Congress to push forward legislation to improve our lives and to take the bold action that's necessary to meet this moment. We're only as safe as our weakest link, as they say, and the smartest approach is to work toward resilience as a team. I know you'll have a productive symposium, and I look forward to supporting your efforts as your representative in Congress.
So even though he's a politician, he's a good politician. Okay. Now I have the pleasure of introducing the first of the two keynote speakers, Obi Kaufman. Is Obi want to come make his way up? And as he's walking up, he is selling his books back there. So let me tell you about it. So Obi Kaufman is the author and illustrator of many best-selling and award-winning books, including the California Field Atlas, The State of the Water, Understanding California's Most Important Resource, The Forests of California, this year's Coasts of California, and next year's The Deserts of California. Obi will be wrapping up his Field Atlas series in 2024 with another book, The State of Fire, Understanding How, When, Where, and Why California Burns. On a constant speaking tour, Obi can be found regularly addressing issues of conservation and resilience to such groups as the Audubon Society, Mojave Desert Land Trust, the California Naturalists, Stanford University, and today here in Anderson Valley. So Obi is as much a poet as he is a student of science, and today we welcome his unique voice to the stage with a statewide perspective. So please welcome Obi.
Thank you. Wow. Look at you all beautiful people. All right, look, from this perspective, I gotta get a picture. Come on now. Can everybody just like raise your hand? What's up, community? All right. Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at you. All right. Make sure you get a copy of that. It's fun. Okay. We have the first slide there. Okay, thank you for having me. I have two things I want to do this morning with the few minutes that I have been graciously allotted by the Anderson Valley Land Trust to use at my discretion. These two things I want to do include, what happened to that side? Oh. I don't know. That's wrong slide. No, the left hand there is all completely distorted. You can see the original in the book back there. Anyway, so these two things I want to do include telling a particular kind of story based on the conclusions that I am beginning to draw after so many years of walking, studying, painting, discussing, and writing on and about California's good earth. And two, I want to gush about what a beautiful and precious entity I know the Anderson Valley and the Navarro Watershed to be. If I could, I would let the latter topic then totally eclipse the former and spend my time as some sort of preacher, albeit some preacher from a different parish, in front of the local talented and spirited choir, and we could sing. We could sing about the miracle we witness every day, the miracle written across the land and in the water, the miracle of the old trees, the miracle that can be spoken of as the body and the mind of the Navarro. And we can also sing of the miracle that is today, the gathering under the herald of the Anderson Valley Land Trust, the Anderson Valley Wine Growers, and the Navarro River Resource Center of so many human minds and hearts yearning always for a deeper connection and a more profound understanding of the subtle and the explicit forces that drive the patterns of the place to such a specific degree that the watershed itself looks like something alive. Something becomes someone that moves within an adaptive cycle an adaptive cycle between new growth, conservation, and release, as all living systems do. And in our congregation, in this, our better community, while we wrestle in our hearts with injustices of the past, injuries imposed, old growth lost, anadromous life ground degraded, mammals lost never to return, we understand that grace remains, abiding in love, waiting for the cooler minds of stewardship to champion the noble cause. Next slide, please. There are a number of issues to unpack with specific deference to the two topics on the table today, namely, what are resilient lands in the global phenomenon that is the burgeoning age of the Anthropocene, and what does that mean for the Anderson Valley? I suppose a corollary question might be related to the causal relationship between any current degradation of the thinking system via its current state of potentially being overdrawn from and bloated on agricultural nutrient deposition. And the other topic, as summarized in the rallying cry of today's symposium, think like a watershed. We are asked to positively imagine that one, the watershed can think, and two, that we can imagine what form those thoughts would take. Where those two topics overlap, both ultimately ecological in character, whether we are talking about human ecology or ecology in the more than human world, have consequences in connectivity theory related to land designation and reciprocating stewardship. So all of that rhetoric revolves around the centralized concept of what may turn out to be a meaningless word, and that word is nature. If it isn't proven to be meaningless, this word nature, surely we'll find it to be laden with a kind of cultural weight that either defines humans as being something apart from it, and therefore commodifiable, or something quasi-spiritual in nature that has little application in the realm of ecological science. In my tenure as a walker of California's backcountry, I lean less towards Wallace Stegner's view of wilderness as a geography of hope, set aside and contrasting the urban world of the modernist, as I lean towards the world described in 1989 by James Rust, a Southern Miwok elder of Mariposa County, who said, "The white man sure has ruined this country. It's all returned back to wilderness." Surely in Anderson Valley, we find nature with a capital N, invited into the human sphere, and drawn as hopeful geography where ancient forces still govern all local economies and ecologies. All right, next slide, please. So a fashionable word these days is rewilding. Rewilding can be a problematic term in that it may mask an anti-humanist element that I don't believe is productive. And there are other speakers here today that may illuminate this point, but I speak of rewilding as an evolutionary concept rooted in deep time, offering what can be a kind of genetic code, an informational cipher, even a heading from our efforts based in determining insight as to the character of California's truer self, the one beyond the so successfully imposed concrete veneer of the 20th and 21st century. The rivers of the Sierra Nevada are 10 million years old and began to cut their path across the mountains deep in the Miocene before California was today's recognizable shape. 10 million years from now, be the map on the right there, when the biosphere is recovering from the sixth mass extinction, and the peninsula of Baja is the island of Baja, and Los Angeles is a suburb of the archipelago of San Francisco, what new species will rewilding have birthed? Will placental mammals even still be a thing? Let us then imagine rewilding as an engagement of energies that invite nature, capital N, into the into our quickly approaching post-carbon society. Rewilding is then a manner of reparations, a veering away from simplification and a full-on investment in diversity, not only biodiversity, but diversity of thought and land management applications. I'm talking about the marriage of scientific innovation and traditional ecological knowledge. A marriage whose success will determine the quality of residency not only in this place, but in all places for at least the next millennium. Next slide, please. Okay. What we have done with water in California rivals anything humans have done with anything anywhere at any time. Building an infrastructure that is able to convey more than 20 million acre-feet of water for hundreds of miles, reliably for over a century, and including physiographically impossible moments where the San Joaquin now flows backwards, and over the Grapevine in Los Angeles County, the water is pumped up and over the mountains in the largest elevation by quantity gain of pumped water anywhere in the world. Remember that water is electricity's #1 customer in the state. We can agree on the wonder and perhaps the hubris of the invention to turn California's physiography into a molded being of our own design, however temporary. The amazing feat that was the construction of California's current hydro circuit is an effort that will only again be rivaled by how, over the next century, it will again need to be transformed. As we think like a watershed in the age of climate breakdown by way of anthropogenic global warming, we will marvel at how humans rearrange themselves geographically, seeking homeostasis within naturalized carrying capacities as the mega droughts expand and water supplies become focused on salvaging the bounties of massive rain bombs in the form of atmospheric rivers. 21 days of rain will now become the new normal's wet year. And though we will see more inches of precipitation, we will know correspondingly decreased intervals between snow drought events, and we will know greater aridity everywhere. How does a democratic society, or more importantly, a local community of neighbors, absorb and resist this massive disturbance? Short on specific prescription, I know that evidence of this blessed trail through the bottlenecks of the future can be found here today in this circle, in the story we are collectively telling here and now. Next slide, please. Because that is what we're doing, isn't it? We are done with arguing, and now is the age of the story, the better story. And what is a story? A story is a potent kind of cognitive entity, if you will. I mean, transferable and infectious. The entity exists in the social space, and because of its unique agency, is capable of upending divisive ideology by its invitation to common forms and common perspectives. It is painfully clear in the age of opinionated punditry, where multinational corporate agendas profit from disinformation and communicative dissonance that keeps local communities suspicious and antagonistic on the neighborhood scale. That it isn't a better argument that changes people's minds. It's only by that secret human-only technology of the gift that is a better story do we unite. The quality of this unity is inherently diverse, and its complexity defines its resiliency. Is it possible then that each of you represents a node of this elaborate web we weave? Perhaps as a pollinator, take our apiary cousins, or as an ecological engineer, think of our returning pond building friends, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, or as the deliverer of nutrient information whose very being in so many languages may translate as food given, as our salmonid family, who we call back here today with our hearts like drums, pleading for just a bit more time to prove ourselves worthy of their blessings before they disappear and we are lost. Sixth and final slide, please. So as we, the generalized community of California, transition from the age of consumerist progress into the age of reciprocity and resiliency, if such a thing can be imagined, as we dislodge our paradigms from waste production, for as the great agrarian philosopher Wendell Berry reminds us, the number one product of the American economy is waste. And to turn to economic patterns that are cyclical pattern, resembling the calendar, resembling the shape of the horizon, resembling the shape of the eagle's nest, remembering the shape of the huddled team. More and more eyes will be on the Anderson Valley because here is a community that gets it and has always gotten it. I mean, left to yourselves, you'd all be fine. Without Highway 128, Highway 1, you'd all progress sustainably, reinvigorating your local language speciation, sparking some kind of booming renaissance, reinvigorating your local, and happy if you're more than abundant, hyper locality as it is in all forms of sustenance, but you aren't alone, are you? Fires burn inside and out. On ridgelines in our real space, and imposingly uncontained across our collective spirit. So we build fire corridors and we practice our protocol and steel our resolve towards regeneration. And listening to the elders, the non-human elders of Hendy Woods, we burn light, we burn often, we burn early. Fire must have a seat at the table. That is the way of the old growth. Although no human has yet witnessed the return of old growth conditions in any habitat, we can imagine what such a community might look like. The dilemma is that this imagining can't happen within the individual. It can only happen when we think like a watershed, and thinking like a watershed requires the sublimation of excess in favor of long-term health. For the body of the watershed reflects the quality of the human spirit as it flows from community member to community member. This year, across hundreds of square miles in Northern California, oak trees of over a dozen species have conspired in a massed year of acorn production. And through interconnected mycorrhizal networks have decided to sing of the gift of place and purpose. I can hear that song, and I know you can too. Under your feet right now, that song pulses in light and information, and that relay conveys the knowledge that this is a special place. Perhaps as special as any place, anywhere. And that specialness, that preciousness, that sacredness is reflected in all the human faces gathered here today. And in that reflection is the meaning of hope, love, and resiliency. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brock. I think you've given us a lot to unpack and digest.
I'm Obi. Brock's up next.
Yeah.
Obi. And don't forget he has his wonderful books in the back. They're really, really beautiful watercolors. Okay, next is Brock. And so Brock is really responsible for the subtitle of this conference, Think Like a Watershed. He's a senior biologist at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center and a true visionary who has mentored and taught many of us, many people in this room, including me. I had the pleasure of meeting him for the first time about 10 years ago when I invited him to keynote our Silicon Valley Watershed Summit down there. So He has a few words for us now, and then he is going to be giving the closing comments at the end. Brock?
Woo-hoo! How y'all feeling? Yeah? I'll put my little timer on here. Well, hi everybody. It's a deep pleasure and honor to be here. Again, my name is Brock Dahlman. I hail from West Sonoma County, near the bustling metropolis of Occidental there on Coleman Valley Road and Russian River Basin. And I'm just happy to be here and full of gratitude for everybody who organized this event. Also want to give some props to the Grange movement. I was one of the folks on Sebastopol Grange Retrofit 2.0 and still a Grange member. So I think the Grange movement is an amazing phenomenon, and I'm happy to be in a Grange hall here. And Ronald, thank you for your comments and just representing the past, present, future of time immemorial embodied in your wisdom and presence. So deeply appreciate that. And then so cutting to the chase on just relative to the theme of today and kind of a overarching pattern. I want to basically skip stones over deep water here. And in this idea of thinking like a watershed, Linda and I were chatting on the phone, and I want to definitely give props to that phrase that I first learned about, which actually comes from a community called the Mattole. And there's a group called the Mattole Watershed Council and the Mattole Salmon Group. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, they actually produced a video called Thinking Like a Watershed. I still have it in VHS. Remember those big tapes and things? And it was about their efforts in the Mattole to bring back salmon. And they're thinking like a watershed. And so just honoring the etymology of this phraseology of thinking like, and I appreciate Obi's thoughts about thinking about and watersheds and the idea of watersheds as a sentient entity that has the capacity to think, which somehow we, based the bipedal saxo saline solution, which is you hominids out there, somehow think that that's our own. We're the provenance of thought is solely held within the headwaters of the hominid. And that's just kind of a party foul on the planet. If we want to get into thinking like a watershed, then I would support us in recognizing that when we talk about watersheds and the shape of watersheds and the geography, the topography of watersheds, we'll often start with a watershed, if we're thinking from the ridge to the river to the reef, that will start at the ridge line, which is often referred to as the headwaters. And I would like us to support us in recognizing and embodying the watershed, that to start in the headwaters, the most important headwaters we need to start in is the water in our own damn heads. It's right up here. It's about mitigating cerebral imperviousness. And that's what this event, as far as I can tell, is about, is how do we infiltrate not only the information, but the inspiration of this day, of you all coming together with this goal, with this collaborative and convivial coming together here to think like a watershed, the Navarro watershed. As I drove in yesterday, I came up 128, and yay for the watershed divide sign there that lets me know I'm leaving the Russian River Basin through the Dry Creek system there, and there's a watershed moment, right? I'm passing in, I'm entering into the Navarro watershed, say in that Yorkville zone, and beginning to flow like water down as 128 comes down into this valley, and then eventually, as we know, all the way out to the ocean. And so when I think about embodying the watershed and getting from the headwaters and how that feels in the heart waters, it really gets me to the hands. And if you all were to cup your hands and hold them out like this, you have a three-dimensional watershed model in your hands at all times. And the Navarro is exactly this shape. It's got this perfect little shape. I hold it out like so. 128's kind of right here where my pinkies meet. The Russian River, if I butt hands with somebody else, is another basin over there, an adjacent basin. And then we basically have this slopes, and the main stem of the Navarro is where my hands come together, and the mouth of the watershed is out there at the beach. And then what's really interesting is all these tributaries between my fingers, and all the surface area and the uplands is really the skin and the wrinkles of our hands. And the business end of this deal is, while the valley is this little central valley, if you want to think like a watershed, if we want to talk about where the groundwater comes from in between here, where the recharge areas are, where the slopes, where the muscle and the tissue and the flesh of the watershed is, it's the entirety from ridge to river to reef. And our opportunity to think like a watershed is really an invitation to resiliently and reverentially retrofit from ridge to river to reef all human land use within this system. And so all the forestry, all the rangeland, all the ag, vineyards, apples, the little human community city opportunities, the rural residential homesteads, all of those opportunities, everyone has your own personal responsibility in this bizarre world called private property. And I really appreciate Ronald's point about their indigenous worldview of moving from the me to the we, and that there's not having I. The individuation fetish is kind of a bit of a pandemic in this worldview that believes that the planet is a commodity rather than community, and that really the we and relationship is what's important. And so for years, and I think there's a copy back there, I can leave them, I did trainings called Basins of Relations, and it was about starting and sustaining community watershed groups. In fact, I worked on a Navarro watershed process back in the late 90s, I think, and have been coming to the Navarro for a couple decades now, and happy to see many of you old friends, you know who you are, and new friends, you know who you are, because it's all of you. And really this idea of relations, and I think, you know, my observation and experience in collaborating with indigenous communities in many places in the world, often there's this idea of all my relations or something akin to that, and key word is akin to that, of the idea of relationship. And while Einstein had a theory of relativity, I believe indigenous wisdom has a theory of relativity, which is really this idea of a kincentric worldview. Enrique Salmon, Dennis Martinez, read up on their work about kincentrism and being the kinesthetics, that we are kin, the aesthetics, right? Not kinesthetics is muscle memory and body movement per se, but kinesthetics is the aesthetics that we are kin with all life. We are one expression of an unbroken continuum of life on planet water. It ain't planet Earth, people, it's planet water. And for 3.8 billion years, from this original archaeobacteria that basically fed on methane, we are an unbroken chain of the presence of life. And you guys and us collectively as animals and fungus and plants and algae and bacteria are these incredible expressions of a system gaming physics and chemistry to create conditions conducive for life. And so earth and air and fire and water create conditions conducive for life infused with spirit through time. And that's really my sense of what success looks like for your ultimate goal. And I love all the little components there: water, fire, plant, land use, planning. How do we create conditions conducive for life? And what does sustainability look like? And my sense of that is that sustainability is about our ability collectively to sustain the cycles of life. And the two cycles I'm interested in is the carbon cycle and the water cycle, because life as we know it on this planet, the central atom is carbon, and it's carbon-based life, full stop. Post-carbon, that's called extinction to me. Post-petroleum, I want to talk about that. Post-fossil fuel addiction, I want to talk about that. Post-carbon, I understand, having done enough organic chemistry, why that phrase is there: carbon-based life, organic molecules, but there's no post-carbon unless you're talking extinction. So let's focus on post-petroleum fetish, right? And move beyond that into an actual carbon-centric life, carbon farming. But guess what? Life by volume is mostly water. So the atom of life is carbon and the molecule of life is water. And no water, no life. And we get that one. And that's the essence of this watershed, this fire shed, this air shed, this soil shed, this salmon shed, this life shed, this spirit shed, from ridge to river to reef. You all tag, you're it. And this living lifeboat, when we get back to holding our hands out, we've got the living lifeboat here. And basically it's an all hands on deck moment for this to pull together, to unify, to come together, and really basically batten down your watershed hatches from stem to stern, from summit to sea, and figure out what does resiliency really look like, which is a reverential rehydration retrofit of a revolution that's going to be embodied in a convivial expression, which is what this event is about. And I would offer you that the indicator species that's going to keep you honest is the salmon. Your coho salmon, your steelhead, at times you get some Chinook in the system, kings. Those salmon, those anadromous organisms, they're born in freshwater, they go to saltwater, they get super big, they come back, they spawn, they die, they bring back all the calcium, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, the fish emulsion fertilizer that other life eats and then flies up or crawls up to the ridgelines and poops it out. I am that which I have not shat, and that which I do is the poo-poo that feeds the system. If I'm eating salmon flesh and it's going back into the system of the soil food web and the mycelial network into the headwaters, again, of the heart waters, of the stomach waters, of the back end of the system. Waste equals food, and it's an input for another part of the system. And our job is to get really good at getting rid of waste and seeing waste as resource. All that excess fuel load on the forest slope, fire, looks like gully food to me, looks like carbon sequestration, looks like to me, looks like clean water to me, looks like groundwater recharge to me, looks like in-stream flow augmentation to me, problems and solutions and integration. And that's what I want to, I'm really looking forward to today's agenda. It's what I see a lot of y'all talking about is the component parts, but what ultimately success should look like is an emergent whole, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And we is really the part I'm looking for, because we are a part of it, not apart from it, and I can't wait to be with you for the rest of the day. Bless you.
Okay, getting warmed up. Okay, I'd like to introduce up next, Ananda Maine. Is she here? Okay, great. So she is a student at Anderson Valley High School. We're talking about the whole, we're talking about the future, and nothing better than to hear from the next generation.
Hello. Sorry. There. Doesn't matter. Sorry. Hello, my name is Ananda Maine, and I have been in Anderson Valley 10 out of the 13 years of my life. Though I have not been living in Anderson Valley as long as a lot of the people I know. Anderson Valley is an incredibly important part of my life. A lot of AV's weather is incredibly beautiful. That's the main thing that stands out to me. Such as the light ocean fog in the morning, occasional rain, wind sweeping across the meadows and hills, and comfortable warm days in the spring. I'm completely sure of the importance of maintaining our valley's charms. Growing up in Anderson Valley can lead to many lovely experiences, but there are also some factors that make living here kind of difficult. The hot temperatures that the valley reaches in the summer is very uncomfortable to live through. And as a kid who craves the outside world, this is especially hard. It's true that we for years have often had very hot summers in Anderson Valley, but each year almost seems to break a new record in hottest temperature. At least it feels like it. Not only is this dangerous to attempt to thrive in places like school where we eat and take all our breaks outside, but can also cause really serious events. I have not gone a year of life without hearing of a new fire close to home. Recently, these fires tend to become so huge, a thick layer of smoke covers the valley, even when the fires are counties away. Growing older with these effects of climate change happening periodically, these events seem to become less and less terrifying. Massive fires near home seem to be a part of the yearly routine, instead of something for me to anxiously pay attention to and prepare myself for possible danger. Instead of packing a bag of items to be ready to go in case of a quick evacuation, being a time to fear the possibility of losing everything, it in a way marks the beginning of summer. The clouds of smoke that grow outside seem to almost set a comfortable hazy lighting, the smell of smoke being almost nostalgic. Year after year of panic after panic, I've become more and more desensitized to fearing the effects of climate change. And that seems true with the majority of other youth. This, of course, doesn't take away my understanding of the dangers and severity of climate change, but as a person growing up in the midst of crisis, the crisis is normalized. Within a lot of today's youth, the normalization of disasters unfolding around us is partially due to guilt of being born into fueling this fire. The tools we use to survive are what we are used to, and it's no surprise that taking these tools, such as fossil fuels, plastic, mass use of wood, that our lives seemingly depend on when you take these things away will become harder and harder to fathom. It's easy to be angry at yourself for your carbon footprint, but continue on life without a change, as we feel there is no control that we really have when these tools were created for us to rely on, and that's what we've been doing our entire lives. The way people my age's minds are subconsciously set to see climate change as hard to approach, out of our control, and generally just a normal part of daily life, may be seen as set in stone for kids and adults addressing this problem. But there's also a power to normalization. With enough effort, we can change what concepts are normalized today, instead making sustainability and working towards a better future normal and approachable. You may ask, considering the large mass of youth in Anderson Valley, how can we normalize acting to help our climate with so many kids? To that I say, I believe and hope if we incorporate more, and I mean a lot more, and more constant, like climate change related education and sustainable projects into people growing up's daily lives, a much larger mass of youth can realize how much of an effect they really have, along with normalizing climate action. In the end, today's youth have a much more powerful impact in our world than it may appear. I hope to see you.
Amanda. Also, as we're thanking Amanda, I wanted to ask, we have a number of other volunteers from the high school and such. I wonder if you could just raise your hands. Okay, now it's time to put your seatbelt on because next is Patrick Miller. He's a world-class landscape architect who happens to love Anderson Valley so much he's really become a full-time volunteer conservation director. Take it away.
Okay, we're almost on time, and I'm going to try and, in theory, it was a 10-minute flyover. I'm going to try and make it a 7-minute flyover. I do want to mention that up here on the board that was mentioned on the butcher paper, if you have a thought, there is a box with post-ums and a pen. Please fill it out and stick it under one of those categories. The deeper dive category is what do we do about this? So that's sort of the catch-all for thought. Okay. I want to say that one of the things we need to define is what is resiliency, as I mentioned before. One of my favorite resilient comments about Anderson Valley is that there's no straight road here. And that helps keep us resilient from that outside world. But not entirely. But it certainly does slow things down. It gives us a different timeline. So I'm going to go over facts very quickly. All of this will be ultimately on our webpage, so you can stare at these slides more in the future. My idea of resiliency is balance, and I want to thank Sally Schmidt, who passed away recently, has a wonderful movie made for her or about her called I Sold the French Laundry. And the first thing she talks about in her life and her craft and her art and business was balance. And I really think balance is the key for ecology, for habitat, for water supply, groundwater and surface water, fire management, economics, tourism, and community. It doesn't affect one or the other. It's all of the above. So it is thinking like a whole, like the seasons of the year. They balance us out. The watershed. It is, you'll see lots of slides like this, and there's an image in the back of Conserved Lands. It's the largest coastal watershed in Mendocino County. It's not dammed, which is different than the Russian River, which has lots of dams on it. So in that sense, it is a naturally flowing watershed that the Navarro, as most of you know, starts here in Philo, right down the river by the land and what used to be Wellspring, now River's Bend. It is about 315 square miles. It's mostly forest with a lot of rangeland and about 5% agriculture. It flows significantly differently throughout the year. The largest ever recorded is about 65,000 CFS. This was taken from the Greenwood Road Bridge at only 18,000 cubic feet a second. So back when it really flooded, it has flooded recently. I do want to mention the Pomo that lived here and as hunter-gatherers and tradespeople from afar. There were and there have been recorded different settlements. And if you really look on the maps, you go, well, this is obvious. That's where I would live too. You know, there's certain sort of the down by the Greenwood Road Bridge, for example. Then in history, there was the lumbering period, and there were at one time over 50 lumber mills in the watershed. These are the major ones. There's an excellent exhibit at the Historical Museum on timber and timber operations. But that did have an effect on the valley, on the ecology, on the water supply, on the surface hydrology and the siltation of the river. Right now, there are some conserved lands, be they public lands, like Hendywood State Park. Of the watershed, only about 2%, 3% is in public ownership. The county relies on land trusts such as the AVLT and Mendocino Land Trust and others to be responsible for open space and conservation. And that's about 7%. About less than half, or about 0.5% is fully open to the public. Everybody who comes here thinks, oh, it's all public land. No, it's Hendy Woods and Navarre River Redwood State Park and Faulkner Park and Indian Creek County Park. That's it. So there's really not many public lands for people to go recreate. But when you look at the assessor parcel maps, there's over 3,000 individual parcels. That doesn't mean that they're all built. Many people own 10 parcels or 4 parcels. But there's a lot of parcels that could happen or be built out. Timberlands, this is just major timberlands. By that I mean those that are specifically identified or owned for commercial timber properties. It's, the ones I'm showing are MRC, Congaree, and the Webharp Timber Forest. But when you add select ranch lands, large ownerships of multiple parcels, how are these going to be conserved? Or are these going to be logged or grazed and then ultimately be sold off into individual parcels of those 3,000? That probably represents, wild guess here, 1,000 of those parcels. Agriculture. We are an ag community. As mentioned earlier, we have about 2,500 acres in under cultivation in Vineyard. If you go from Meyer Creek Cellars up to Yorkville, you can add another 590 acres under cultivation. But ag is not just grapes. It also includes all sorts of other stuff, whether it's Vicky's or Pam's, Pam Laird's, Vicky Brock's, Philigreen Farm, the pepper folks. We've got lots of different kinds of agriculture in Anderson Valley. So think, these are the advertising. You know, it's like, oh, yeah, we've got 128. But at the same time, we're also written up in the New York Times and Smithsonian Magazine and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and tourist magazines. So from the county standpoint, we have zoning. And what was really good in the last time the general plan was updated is our zoning held. There wasn't a change in the land use patterns. What was Ag 140 stayed Ag 40. What was Forest Land 160 stayed Forest Land 160. Now, the county will be updating the general plan in the next 10 years. Will that hold? Is that part of our own resiliency equation to keep the zoning the way it is and not turn into rural sprawl, if you will, that exists in some of Sonoma County now? And there are changes in like timber preserved land. That's to zoning, that's a tax break in order to keep the timber there so we can harvest it. Maybe there's a better use for timber, and that's in terms of carbon sequestration. A question, maybe it ought to be timber preserved land, not timber production land. So a lot of times, even though something's zoned one thing, it may get used some other way, like a vineyard that's carved out of a redwood forest, or rangeland that turns into a swimming pool and tennis courts and mega houses, and forest lands that get sold off as parks, basically, for individual property owners. I will say the Land Trust and others have been working with the county on the Sustainable Agricultural Conservation Program, SALT, and we have mapped important forest land, important rangeland, where potential within 3 and 5 miles of communities like Boonville, Philo, and Navarro, where potential growth could happen and where preservation efforts, or conservation efforts, I should say, should be targeted. So we are thinking from the water, from the ridge line to the river. And one thing that the Land Trust has been talking with the San Francisco Estuary Institute and doing an historical back to the future, looking at the watershed from an historical ecological standpoint. And that would give us some markers to look forward to how we conserve our resources in a very proactive way. We're working on a grant for that right now. If anybody happens to have about $50,000, we'd love your help. Anyway, so the watershed, the river, and that's my flyover. Just food for thought. So our first panel session, we'll get together. Let's take like a 2-minute break, and it probably says 5 on the agenda, but I'm trying to speed it up. So the first panel.
You didn't send me.
I wish I could do it.
Building resilient forests while getting that.